I rise to oppose the amendments for many of the reasons that have been outlined here today. Because I think, first of all, these amendments are unnecessary. We've heard a lot about gaps and, targeted, not blanket surveillance and bringing it up to date. This is, of course, absolute nonsense. The Met already, as the Noble Lord Paddock has said, the Met and presumably the other agencies already have the powers that they need, powers that I would suggest go far beyond what they need. And we heard a lot today about Paris and Lee Rigby, but in fact, all of my information says that the shortcomings of the investigation in Paris, or the pre-investigation, and of the Lee Rigby tragic murder was, in fact, it was not a lack of surveillance, it was a lack of good police work. This is what was fundamentally missing. It was not about not having enough recordings or enough surveillance. It was a lack of information, of not talking to marginalised community groups. The cross-party committee that looked into the handling of the Lee Rigby killers and that reported in November exposed major internal failings in the way that agencies pursue leads. It found that both men had been known to the agencies for years. One had even been considered a priority, but basic problems such as delays, poor communication and bad record keeping were actually what caused the problems, and it was not the surveillance of the suspects. It seems to me as well that these amendments, although they are obviously within the letter of the law, are fundamentally undemocratic in the way that they are being brutally pushed into our parliamentary process. It seems to me that this is a way of short-circuiting real scrutiny of these amendments. And, great that they were looked at before, but they still need looking at again. And if they are going to be looked at, I think the only thing, and I do hope the Minister listens to this, the only thing that absolutely has to be done in the future is that they go to the Joint Committee on Human Rights. And I think that they should actually look at these before there's any more discussion in either of these houses. For me, this Snoopers Charter, it actually reduces our rights. Surely that is exactly what the terrorists are after. Terrorists actually want to impact on our society. They want to impact on every single person who doesn't believe the way that they do. And it seems to me that's what we're letting happen here. It is absolutely mad. The Mayor of London recently said this civil liberties stuff in the most dismissive way, as if that's somehow a negotiable thing, that civil liberties aren't terribly important when we compare them with the threat of terrorism. I would say that's exactly when we need our civil liberties, and that's what we should be known for in the West. There's also the cost. I mean, my experience of the Met over the past 15 years is that they absolutely can't deal with all the data they've got already. I've asked lots of questions of the Met about their databases and the information they've got on them. They don't know how many databases they've got. They actually can't tell me. They can't tell me to the nearest 100 how many databases they've got. They also, on their databases, often can't search. For example, on their domestic extremist database, which I have the dubious pleasure of being on as a domestic extremist, apparently, I think under the Noble Lord Blair's regime. I have asked, because they have in fact now changed the definition of what a domestic extremist is, and I'm very much hoping I'm not on the database anymore, but who knows, because I can't get the information. They cannot search that database for serious criminal activity. So if you ask them, because they've changed their definition to serious criminals, if you ask them, well, can you look through the database and find out how many serious criminals you've got? Oh, we haven't logged that, we can't do that. So not only are we expecting the Met to deal with more data when they can't sort and file the data they've got already, but I would argue that they have enough powers. The Noble Lord Blair as well talked about some very tragic incidents where more surveillance might actually solve a crime or find a lost child. But in fact, the police already have these powers. They have them under RIPA, and they are misusing them already, in my view. Under RIPA, they don't even have to go to a judge to ask if they can put surveillance on somebody. They just have to go to a chief inspector in a nearby unit and say, could you sign this for me? Surveillance, on somebody or other. So I actually think we should be thinking not about giving more powers to our spies and to our police. We should actually be very careful about this and actually think about taking back some of those powers and actually making sure that we persist in keeping our civil liberties and human rights and don't let the terrorists take them away from us.